The starship Harmonious Accord drifted silently through the void of deep space. Its sleek hull, normally glowing with the soft blue light of its engines, was now dark except for the occasional emergency beacon flashing weakly. Inside, the atmosphere was tense. The ship's main systems had failed after being hit by an unexpected stellar flare 6 hours ago. Captain Zixlar stood on the command deck, all 6 of his limbs rigid with stress. His iridescent scales reflected the dim red emergency lights, giving him an almost fiery appearance. Around him, his crew worked frantically at their stations, but their efforts were becoming increasingly desperate. "Status report," Zixlar demanded, his voice a melodic trill despite the gravity of the situation. First Officer Shimara looked up from her console, her large, pupilless eyes blinking rapidly in the universal Venturi expression of distress. "Life support is at 42% capacity and falling, Captain. We have perhaps 18 hours before critical failure. Communications array is completely destroyed. Propulsion systems are offline." "And our position?" The ship's navigator, a small, furry Creston named Jib, chittered anxiously. "We are drifting into the outer edge of the Scarlet Belt asteroid field, Captain. Without propulsion, we cannot alter course." Zixalar's inner eyelids closed briefly. The Scarlet Belt was notorious for its unpredictable radiation-soaked rock formations. A damaged ship drifting into its path was unlikely to emerge. Medical Officer Trilva approached the captain, her translucent body pulsing with nervous blue light. "Captain, perhaps it is time to consider the option we discussed." The command deck fell silent. Every alien crew member knew what Trilva was suggesting, and the idea made them uncomfortable. Zixlar's scales rippled with reluctance. "Is there truly no other solution, Chief Engineer?" Velnok, a methane-breathing Quarian, extended his tendrilled appendages in a gesture of helplessness. "The power coupling in Section 4 was completely destroyed, Captain. Without it, we cannot restore main power. The radiation levels in that section are too high for any of us to survive long enough to attempt repairs, even if we had replacement parts, which we do not." "And the human?" Zixlar asked quietly. Trilva's light pulsed faster. "Our records indicate that humans coming from a Class 12 Deathworld have remarkable radiation resistance compared to our species. And this particular specimen has engineering expertise." "Specimen?" Security Chief Corvin rumbled, his silicon-based body grinding slightly as he shifted. "That's a living being, Doctor, not a lab sample." "Of course," Trilva flickered apologetically. "I meant no disrespect. I merely meant that his physiology is extraordinarily robust." Zixlar considered for a long moment. "The human, Jack Morrison, was supposed to be delivered safely to the Galactic Council as part of a new diplomatic exchange program. Waking him early from cryosleep for such a dangerous task could be seen as a violation of their mandate. But the alternative was the death of everyone aboard." "Prepare the cryopod for revival," Zixlar ordered finally. "Officer Shimara, please accompany Dr. Trilva. Your telepathic abilities may help ease the human's transition to consciousness." 20 minutes later, the medical bay hummed with activity as the cryopod slowly warmed to appropriate human temperatures. The alien crew gathered around nervously, none of them having seen a conscious human before. "Remember," Trilva instructed, her body glowing with professional focus, "humans are dense world creatures. Their bone structure is much heavier than ours and their muscle mass is significant. Do not be alarmed by his appearance or movements." The cryopod hissed as it opened, releasing a cloud of vapor. Inside, a figure began to stir. Jack Morrison was average-sized by human standards, but to the alien crew he looked alarmingly solid and heavy. His skin was tan, marked with several scars, and his dark hair was cut short in a practical style. "Vital signs stabilizing," Trilva reported, studying her instruments with fascination. "Remarkable recovery speed. Most species require at least 6 hours to safely regain consciousness after cryosleep." Jack's eyes opened suddenly. They were a deep blue that reminded Zixlar of the oceans on his homeworld. The human blinked several times, then focused on the aliens surrounding him. "Well?" he said in a surprisingly calm voice. "This isn't the Galactic Council." His words came out slightly slurred as his body continued to warm. Shimara stepped forward, extending a gentle telepathic greeting. "Mr. Morrison, I am First Officer Shimara. We apologize for waking you early, but we face an emergency situation." Jack sat up slowly, his movements careful as he adjusted to the ship's artificial gravity, which was set lower than Earth standard. He rubbed his face with one hand. "What kind of emergency requires waking up the popsicle?" Captain Zixlar moved closer. "Our ship was damaged by a stellar flare. We are without power, drifting into an asteroid field, with life support failing. Our chief engineer believes the damage is beyond our capacity to repair." Jack swung his legs over the edge of the cryopod, causing the entire unit to shift slightly under his weight. Several crew members stepped back instinctively. "And you're hoping I can help?" he asked, arching an eyebrow. "Your personnel file indicates extensive experience with emergency repairs in hazardous conditions," Velnock explained, keeping a respectful distance. "And your Deathworld physiology may allow you to work in areas that would be lethal to us." Jack looked around at their worried faces, then nodded once. "Let me get dressed and you can show me the damage." 15 minutes later, Jack stood in the engine room, dressed in standard ship coveralls that seemed too tight across his shoulders. He listened intently as Velnock explained the complex damage to the ship's systems, occasionally asking questions that surprised the alien engineer with their insight. "So the main problem is this power coupling," Jack said, looking at the schematics on the display. "And it's in a section flooded with radiation." "Yes," Velnock confirmed. "The levels would cause cellular breakdown in any of our species within minutes, even with protection." Jack nodded thoughtfully, then cracked his knuckles with a series of pops that made Trilva's entire body flash with alarm. "Show me your parts inventory and tools," Jack said simply. "And I'll need access to a fabricator if you've got one." The aliens exchanged glances of cautious hope. "You believe you can repair it?" Captain Zixlar asked. Jack gave a slight smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Captain, I worked salvage on Jupiter's moons for 5 years. Radiation was just part of the job." He rolled his shoulders. "No promises, but I've fixed worse with less." As Jack began to examine the ship's inventory lists, the alien crew watched with a mixture of fear, fascination, and desperate hope. None of them fully understood yet what it meant to come from a world that constantly tried to kill you, or how such a background created people who refused to accept impossible situations. Jack Morrison stood in the main engineering bay, his eyes scanning the holographic display of the ship's damaged systems. The blue light from the screen highlighted the determined set of his jaw. Around him, the alien crew watched nervously as he swiped through different sections of the schematics. "This is worse than I thought," Jack finally said, zooming in on the destroyed power coupling. "The entire housing is melted." Chief Engineer Velnock's tendrils drooped in a gesture of defeat. "Yes, the stellar flare created a power surge beyond our safety system's capacity." Jack tapped his finger against his chin, thinking. The aliens noticed how heavy his movements seemed compared to their own, the solid thud of his boots against the floor as he began to pace around the room. "I need to see it in person," he decided. "Where's the access point to Section 4? Captain Zixlar stepped forward, his iridescent scales catching the emergency lights. "Mr. Morrison, perhaps I didn't make the situation clear. The radiation levels in Section 4 are lethal." "How lethal are we talking?" Jack asked, his voice practical rather than concerned. Medical Officer Trilva glowed brighter with anxiety. "Our scans indicate levels of 350 rems and increasing, a fatal dose for most council species." Jack nodded. "That's high, but not immediately deadly for humans. I've worked in worse for short periods. Got any radiation suits on board?" The aliens exchanged glances of disbelief. "We have emergency containment gear," Security Chief Corvin rumbled, "but it is not designed for those levels. It would only extend survival by minutes." "Better than nothing," Jack replied with a shrug. "Let's grab one and I'll take a look." 20. Minutes later, Jack was dressed in the alien radiation suit. It fit awkwardly on his broader frame, and he had to hunch slightly to keep the helmet sealed properly. First Officer Shimara handed him a small device. "This will monitor the radiation levels," she explained. "When it turns red, you must return immediately." Jack pocketed the device with a nod. "How long until we hit that asteroid field?" "Approximately 16 hours at current drift," Navigator Jib chittered. "Then I've got work to do," Jack said. He turned to Velnok. "You said you have a fabricator. Can it handle metallic alloys?" "Yes, but we lack the necessary materials for a replacement." "Coupling," Velnok replied. Jack grinned for the first time since waking. "Let me worry about that. I'll need to see what I'm working with first." The heavy doors to Section 4 slid open with a hydraulic hiss. The corridor beyond was dark except for flashing red warning lights. Jack stepped through, the alien crew watching from behind a safety barrier. The moment the doors sealed behind him, Jack felt the weight of their desperate situation. The ship was dying around them, and he was their last hope. He switched on his helmet light and moved carefully down the corridor, testing his balance in the reduced gravity. As he approached the engineering junction where the main power coupling had been, his radiation monitor began to beep softly. The device was already showing yellow, approaching dangerous levels. Jack quickened his pace. The scene at the junction was worse than the schematics had shown. The power coupling wasn't just damaged, it was almost completely vaporized. Melted. Metal had fused with surrounding components and the backup systems were charred beyond recognition. Jack whistled low under his breath. Well, that's a proper mess. He took several quick photos with his suit's camera, then began examining the surrounding machinery. His experienced eyes noted what materials remained usable, what might be salvaged, and what was beyond saving. The radiation monitor's beeping increased in tempo. Jack checked it, still yellow but climbing steadily. He had maybe 10 more minutes before hitting the red zone. Carefully, he used a tool from his belt to pry loose a section of the less damaged conduit. He needed a sample to work with. As he worked, the ship groaned around him, the metal hull contracting, in the cold of space. With the sample secured, Jack took one last look around the devastated section. It was bad, but not impossible. He'd seen worse on the Jupiter salvage runs. With the right materials and tools, he could jury-rig something to get them moving again. The monitor turned red, just as he finished his inspection. Time to go. Back in the safe area, Jack removed the alien helmet with relief. He handed the salvaged components to a surprised Velnok. "The primary coupling is completely gone," Jack reported to the waiting crew, "but the conductive elements in the secondary systems are partially intact. If we can fabricate a new housing and repurpose some of these remaining components, we might be able to create a bypass." "A bypass?" Captain Zixlar questioned. "Would that restore full power?" Jack shook his head. "No, but it could give us enough juice to get the engines running at maybe 30%, enough to avoid the asteroids and limp to a repair station." Medical Officer Trilva approached with a scanning device. "Please remain still, Mr. Morrison. I need to assess your radiation exposure." Jack stood patiently as the blue light of the scanner passed over him. The alien doctor's translucent body pulsed with shock as she read the results. "This is remarkable," she said. "You've absorbed a dose that would cause immediate cellular breakdown in our species, yet your readings show minimal damage." Jack shrugged. "Earth's background radiation is higher than most Council worlds. We adapt." "Nevertheless," Trilva insisted, "you should take these." She handed him a small container of pills. "Anti-radiation medication. It will help your body process and eliminate the exposure." Jack accepted them with a nod of thanks, then turned back to Velnok. "I'm going to need access to the fabricator and whatever metals you have available. Plus tools, especially welding equipment." The alien engineer's tendrils waved with newfound hope. "Of course, follow me." In the fabrication lab, Jack spread out his findings and began sketching a design on a datapad. The aliens gathered around, watching with curiosity as his rough human fingers moved across the screen with surprising precision. "This doesn't match any standard coupling design," Velnok observed, peering over Jack's shoulder. "Because it's not standard," Jack explained. "We don't have the right parts for that. This is something I learned when equipment failed during a solar storm near Europa. It's ugly, but it works." Safety Officer Grell, a cautious Palaxian with pale green skin, stepped forward. "This design violates at least 7 safety protocols. The power flow would be unstable." "Unstable is better than dead in space," Jack replied bluntly. "We can stabilize it once we're out of immediate danger." As Jack began programming the fabricator, explaining each step to the fascinated alien crew, a new voice spoke from the doorway. "So, you're the human they woke up." Jack turned to see a woman standing there. Human, with dark hair pulled back in a practical ponytail and brown eyes regarding him carefully. Unlike him, she wore a standard crew uniform rather than the temporary coveralls he'd been given. "Maya Patel," she introduced herself. "Cultural Liaison Officer. I was raised off-world, so they didn't put me in cryo for this trip." Jack nodded in greeting. "Jack Morrison. They tell me we're in a bit of trouble." Maya's expression was skeptical. "That's putting it mildly. Captain asked me to check on your progress." Her eyes moved to the design on the screen. "That doesn't look like any coupling I've seen before." "It's not," Jack confirmed, turning back to his work. "It's what we call a field fix back on Earth. Not pretty, not permanent, but it'll get the job done." As the fabricator hummed to life, beginning to create the first components of Jack's design, Maya watched the human engineer with growing interest. Perhaps there was more to her Earth heritage than she had been taught. The fabrication lab hummed with activity as Jack's makeshift power coupling slowly took shape. The ship's fabricator was not designed for the specific alloys Jack wanted, but he had adapted his design to use what was available. Beside him, Maya Patel watched with growing interest, occasionally translating his more technical Earth terms for the alien crew. "This part here," Jack said, pointing to a curved section emerging from the fabricator, "will channel the power flow around the damaged section instead of through it. Not ideal, but better than nothing." Velnok's tendrils twisted in confusion. "But that will create heat buildup in the secondary junction. Which is why we're adding these cooling fins," Jack explained, showing another piece on his design. "They'll disperse the heat into the surrounding chamber." "Ingenious," Velnok admitted, "though not a solution any council engineer would consider." Jack smiled slightly. Human engineering sometimes values function over form, especially in emergencies. As the final pieces of the makeshift coupling were fabricated, Captain Zixlar entered the lab. His scales had dulled slightly, a sign of stress among his species. "Navigator Jib reports we have accelerated our drift toward the asteroid field," the captain announced. "Our new estimate gives us 12 hours before contact." Jack nodded, gathering the components. "Then we need to move faster. This coupling is ready for installation." "But the radiation levels in Section 4 have increased," First Officer Shimara reminded him. "It's now reading over 400 rems." Jack's face remained calm. "I'll just have to work quicker then." Medical Officer Trilva flashed with concern. "Even for a human, that level of exposure could cause serious damage with prolonged contact." "Define prolonged," Jack asked, already pulling on the radiation suit again. "More than 20 minutes would be extremely dangerous," Trilva replied. Jack checked his watch. "Then I'll do it in 15. The alien crew exchanged worried glances. Maya stepped forward. "Let me help," she offered. "2 humans can work faster than 1. Jack studied her for a moment. "You have engineering experience?" "Basic training," Maya admitted. "But I'm human. I can handle the radiation better than the crew, and I know the ship's systems." After a brief hesitation, Jack nodded. "Gear up, then. We'll need to move fast." As Maya donned a second radiation suit, Security Chief Corvin approached Jack with a small device. "This is a short-range communication unit. It will allow us to monitor your progress and provide guidance if needed." Jack attached it to his suit. "Thanks, keep the channel open." Soon Jack and Maya were entering Section 4 again. The red warning light seemed brighter now. casting eerie shadows through the damaged corridor. Jack carried the new coupling parts while Maya brought the specialized tools they would need. "Stay close," Jack instructed as they approached the engineering junction. "The radiation is worse near the central conduit." Their radiation monitors began beeping almost immediately, the yellow warning indicators flashing. "We've got 15 minutes before we hit the red zone," Jack said, kneeling beside the damaged coupling area. "Hand me the molecular bonder." Maya passed him the tool and Jack began carefully removing what remained of the melted coupling. Through their communication unit, the alien crew listened to their work. "I'm impressed," Maya said as she held a light steady for Jack. "Most humans I've met wouldn't volunteer for radiation exposure." Jack grunted as he worked a stubborn piece of metal free. "Most humans you've met probably didn't grow up in the outer colonies. Radiation was just part of life on Jupiter's moons." "I was raised on Alpha Centauri," Maya explained. "Very protected environment. They taught us that Earth was dangerous and primitive." Jack chuckled. "They weren't wrong. Earth is dangerous. That's why we learned to deal with danger instead of avoiding it." Their monitors beeped more insistently as Jack began installing the first piece of the new coupling. His hands moved with practiced efficiency, but the awkward suit made precise work difficult. "Time check?" Jack asked, not looking up from his work. 8 minutes in," Maya replied. Monitors still yellow but getting closer to red. Through the communication unit, Communications Officer Lyra Day's voice came through. "How is it going out there?" "We're monitoring increased radiation spikes." "Just peachy," Jack replied, his voice strained as he forced 2 components to align. "Though I'd kill for a proper Earth-made spanner right now." "A what?" Lyra Day asked, confused. "A wrench," Maya translated. "He needs a better tool." Jack secured the main housing of the new coupling and began connecting the power conduits. "Maya, I need you to hold this section steady while I bond the connections." As Maya reached in to help, a small warning alarm sounded from deeper in the ship. "What's that?" Jack asked, not looking up from his delicate work. Captain Zixlar's voice came through the comm. "Sensors detect a micrometeor shower approaching. It will hit the ship in approximately 2 minutes." Jack cursed under his breath. "We're not done yet." "You need to return to safety," the captain insisted. "The hull in Section 4 is already compromised. If a micrometeor strikes, then we'll have bigger problems," Jack finished. "But if we don't get this coupling installed, we're dead anyway. We'll take our chances." The radiation monitors switched to red just as the first impacts hit the ship. Small vibrations ran through the hull, growing stronger with each passing second. "Maya, brace yourself," Jack warned as he continued working. A loud bang echoed through the corridor as something small but fast struck the outer hull nearby. The ship shuddered, and a warning light began flashing farther down the corridor. "Hull breach in adjacent section," Navigator Jib reported through the comm. "Emergency seals activated." Jack worked faster, his hands never faltering despite the tension. "Almost there, just need to connect the final power shunt." The impacts continued, some closer than others. Maya held steady, her face set with determination behind her helmet visor. "Radiation levels are climbing fast," she warned. "We've been in the red zone for 3 minutes now." Jack nodded but didn't stop working. "Just need 30 more seconds." A particularly loud impact rocked the ship and a small crack appeared in the wall near them. The air began to hiss faintly. A slow leak. "Jack," Maya said urgently. "We need to go. Now." "Almost there," Jack muttered, making the final connection. With a quick movement, he sealed the housing and activated the emergency power bypass. "Done! Let's move!" They grabbed their tools and ran back toward the safe section, the radiation monitors now blaring continuous warnings. The micrometeor impacts continued around them, the ship groaning under the assault. Just as they reached the safety doors, a violent impact knocked them both off their feet. Jack helped Maya up, pushing her through the doorway first before diving through himself. The doors sealed automatically behind them. The alien crew rushed forward as Jack and Maya removed their helmets, both breathing heavily. "Did it work?" Jack asked between breaths. Velnock was already checking the ship's systems. Power flow is stabilizing. The bypass is holding. The alien engineer's tendrils waved with excitement. We have 32% power capacity restored. AE. Cheer went up from the gathered crew. Captain Zixlar's scales brightened with relief. Navigator, plot a course away from the asteroid field, the captain ordered. Communication, see if you can get a distress signal out. As the crew rushed to their stations, Medical Officer Trilva approached Jack and Maya with her scanner. Your radiation exposure isn't concerning, she said, her body pulsing with worried light. You both need immediate treatment. Jack waved her off. The coupling still needs monitoring to make sure it holds. Maya can go first. Maya shook her head. We'll both go. The crew can monitor the coupling. Jack looked like he might argue, but then nodded tiredly. As they followed Trilva to the medical bay, Maya glanced at the human engineer with new respect. You know, she said quietly, maybe there's something to be said for the Earth way, after all. In the medical bay, Jack sat on an examination table designed for much lighter beings. It creaked under his weight as Medical Officer Trilva moved her scanning equipment over his body. Her translucent form pulsed with different colors as she studied the results. Your cellular damage is significant, she said, her voice musical with concern. But your body is already beginning repairs. Fascinating. Jack shrugged. Humans heal fast. Comes with living on a planet that wants to kill you. Nearby, Maya lay on another table receiving similar treatment. Her exposure had been less severe since Jack had positioned himself to take the brunt of the radiation. The anti-radiation meds are helping, Trilva noted. But you both need rest. Jack was already sitting up. Rest comes later. I need to check. On the coupling, it was a rush job. Before Trilva could protest, the ship's emergency alarm blared again. Captain Zixlar's voice came over the communication system. All crew to emergency stations. The power coupling is showing signs of overload. Jack was on his feet immediately, ignoring Trilva's objections. Maya followed close behind as they rushed to engineering. When they arrived, the situation was tense. Velnok and several crew members hovered around a control panel showing rising energy levels in the makeshift coupling. What happened? Jack demanded, stepping up to the display. The bypass is working, Velnok explained, tendrils twitching nervously. But the power flow is less stable than we hoped. The cooling system cannot keep up with the heat generated. Jack studied the readings. If it fails, we lose everything? Correct, Velnok confirmed. Life support, navigation, engines, all would shut down. The ship had managed to change course, moving slowly away from the asteroid field, but they were still far from safety. Jack turned to Captain Zixlar. How long to the nearest repair? Station? At our current speed, 22 hours. The captain replied, his scales dulled with concern. Jack looked back at the readings. This coupling won't last half that long. We need to stabilize it now. How? Velnok asked. We lack the materials for a better cooling system. Jack thought for a moment, his eyes moving around the engineering bay. What about the food synthesizer cooling unit? Could we repurpose that? Safety Officer Grell gasped. That would leave us without food production. We can survive without fresh food longer than we can without power, Jack pointed out. Maya stepped forward. The environmental systems in the crew quarters also have cooling units. We could use those too. Velnok's tendrils perked up. Yes, that could work. If we create a secondary cooling circuit and link it to the coupling, then let's do it, Jack said, already moving toward the tools. For the next hour, the engineering bay was a flurry of activity. Jack directed the operation, showing Velnok and the other engineers how to disassemble the cooling units and repurpose them. Maya worked alongside them, translating Jack's more technical Earth terms and helping integrate the alien technology. Hand me that flow regulator, Jack called out, lying on his back beneath a control panel. Maya passed him the requested part. The captain says we've cleared the asteroid field's outer boundary. We're in open space now. Good, Jack grunted, connecting wires with practiced ease. One less thing to worry about. As they worked, several alien crew members gathered to watch. They were fascinated by Jack's approach to the problem, direct, sometimes crude, but undeniably effective. He's using a food container as a coolant. Reservoir, First Officer Shimara observed with astonishment. That's not in any technical manual. Humans call it improvising, Maya explained with a small smile. It's what we do best. When the secondary cooling system was finally assembled, Jack stood back to examine their work. It was a strange combination of alien technology and human ingenuity. Tubes and wires connected in ways never intended by their designers, held together in places by material from Jack's own shirt. It's not pretty, Jack admitted, but it should. Hold. Velnock approached a control panel. Shall we activate it? Jack nodded. Slowly. Increase the coolant flow gradually. The alien engineer manipulated the controls with his delicate tendrils. For a moment, nothing happened. Then a low hum filled the room as the recycled cooling units came to life. Everyone watched the temperature readings anxiously. For several seconds, they continued to rise. Then slowly they began to drop. It's working, Velnock announced, his voice filled with relief. The temperature is stabilizing. A cheer went up from the gathered crew. Captain Zixlar's scales brightened to a vivid blue. Mr. Morrison, the captain said formally, the crew of the Harmonious Accord owes you a debt of gratitude. Jack just nodded, suddenly looking very tired. The radiation exposure, combined with hours of intense work, had taken its toll. Maybe, now you'll let me rest, Doc? He said to Trilva, who had been hovering anxiously nearby. The medical officer flashed with agreement. Most definitely. You have exceeded safe radiation exposure limits by... A sudden alarm cut her off. The cooling system was making a strange noise, and one of the connections began to leak a blue fluid. Coolant breach, Velnock called out. The pressure is too high for the recycled components. Jack was immediately alert again, rushing to the system. He examined the leak quickly. The main seal can't handle the temperature differential, he said. We need something more heat-resistant. We have no such materials left, Velnock replied, tendrils drooping. Jack looked around desperately, then at his own hands. A determined expression crossed his face. Yes, we do, he said quietly. Before anyone could stop him, he grabbed a tool and cut a small line across his palm. Blood welled up immediately. The alien crew reacted with shock and horror. Maya stepped forward. Jack, what are you doing? She demanded. Human blood contains iron, Jack explained, holding his bleeding hand over the leaking connection. When exposed to air, it oxidizes. The oxide layer is highly heat-resistant. You're using your blood as a sealant? Maya asked incredulously. Jack nodded, focused on his task. Old emergency repair trick from the Jupiter rigs, not standard procedure, but it works. He smeared his blood carefully over the leaking connection, then wrapped it with a piece of material from his sleeve. To everyone's astonishment, the leak stopped. Monitor that section closely, Jack instructed Velnock. If it starts to leak again, let me know immediately. The alien engineer could only nod, his tendrils waving in what might have been disbelief or admiration, or both. Captain Zixlar approached Jack, studying him with new eyes. In all my years of space travel, the captain said slowly, I have never seen such creative repair methods. Jack smiled tiredly. On Earth we have a saying, necessity is the mother of invention. When survival is on the line, you use what you have. As Medical Officer Trilva finally led Jack away for much-needed treatment and rest, the alien crew gathered around the makeshift cooling system, examining it with newfound respect. Perhaps, First Officer Shimara said thoughtfully, we have been too quick to dismiss Deathworlders as primitive and dangerous. They are dangerous, Security Chief Corvin rumbled, but today, that danger saved us all. The Harmonious Accord moved slowly through space, limping toward the nearest repair station. After 2 days of careful navigation, the makeshift repairs continued to hold, though the entire crew remained on alert for any signs of failure. Jack, Morrison sat in the ship's observation lounge, staring out at the stars. His hand was bandaged where he had cut it to provide the blood sealant. Medical Officer Trilva had treated him extensively for radiation exposure, and while he still felt weak, he was recovering faster than the alien doctor had expected. "Mind if I join you?" Maya Patel asked, approaching with 2 steaming cups. Jack nodded toward the empty seat beside him. "Free Galaxy." Maya handed him one of the cups. "It's supposed to be coffee, but the synthesizer is still operating at minimal capacity. Tastes more like dirty water." Jack sipped it and grimaced. "Still better than what we drank on the Jupiter rigs?" They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, watching the distant stars. "The crew has been talking about you," Maya finally said. "Some of them are calling you the Deathworld miracle." Jack chuckled. "Nothing miraculous about it, just practical problem solving." "To them, it is miraculous," Maya countered. "You walked into radiation that would kill them instantly. You used your own blood as a repair component. These aren't things Council species would even consider." Jack turned to look at her. "What about you? You're human too." Maya looked down at her cup. "I was raised on Alpha Centauri. My parents wanted me to fit in with Council society. They taught me to be ashamed of Earth's primitive ways." She paused. "I've spent my whole life trying to be less human." "And now?" Jack asked. Before Maya could answer, Captain Zixlar entered the lounge. His scales were a healthy bright blue again, indicating his improved mood. "Mr. Morrison," the captain said, "I am pleased to report that we will reach Outpost Gamma 9 in approximately 6 hours. Their repair facilities are ready to receive us." Jack nodded. "Good to hear. The bypass coupling won't last much longer." "Indeed." The captain hesitated, then continued. "The Council representatives at the outpost are eager to meet you. News of your repair methods has spread." Jack raised an eyebrow. "I hope that's a good thing." "It is unprecedented," Zixlar admitted. "Humans have had limited contact with the Council thus far. Your actions may change many preconceptions." After the captain left, Jack turned back to the stars. "Not exactly what I signed up for when I took this job." "Being a human ambassador?" Maya asked with a small smile. "I'm an engineer, not a diplomat," Jack replied. The ship's communication system suddenly came to life. "All personnel to emergency stations," First Officer Shimara's voice announced. "The power coupling is showing critical instability." Jack was on his feet immediately, coffee forgotten. He and Maya rushed to engineering, where they found a scene of controlled chaos. Warning lights flashed on multiple displays as Velnok and his team worked frantically at the controls. "What's happening?" Jack demanded. "The blood sealant is degrading," Velnok explained, tendrils moving rapidly over the controls. "The heat has increased beyond our projections." Jack moved to the main display, studying the readings. "The coolant temperature is rising too fast. We need to reduce the power flow. If we do that, we lose engine capacity." Navigator Jib chittered anxiously. "We will not reach the outpost in time." "Better to arrive late than not at all," Jack countered. He turned to the captain who had just entered the room. "We need to drop to minimal power now, or the whole system will fail." Captain Zixlar hesitated only briefly. "Do it." Velnok began the power reduction procedure, but another alarm sounded before he could complete it. "The coupling housing is rupturing," he reported, tendrils trembling. "Automatic shutdown has been triggered." The lights dimmed as the ship's systems began to power down. Emergency lighting came on, casting eerie shadows through the room. "How long on emergency power?" Jack asked. 8 hours at most." Security Chief Corvin rumbled. "Not enough to reach the outpost." Jack studied the system diagrams, thinking rapidly. "The main problem is the heat buildup in the coupling. If we could manually regulate the power flow, bypassing the automatic shutdown, that would require direct manipulation of the energy stream," Velnok objected. "The interface would need to be physical," Jack finished. "Someone would need to manually adjust the flow regulators." The alien crew fell silent as they realized what Jack was suggesting. "That's suicide," Maya said quietly. "Even for a human. The energy discharge would be painful," Jack acknowledged. but not necessarily fatal. Not if we're quick. Captain, Zixlar stepped forward. I cannot ask this of you, Mr. Morrison. You have already risked your life repeatedly for this ship. You're not asking, Jack replied simply. I'm offering. Before anyone could object further, Jack began gathering the tools he would need. Maya watched him with a mixture of admiration and concern. At least let me help, she said. I can monitor the power levels while you make the adjustments. Jack looked at her for a long moment, then nodded. Stay at the control panel. If the readings go into the red zone, you cut the power immediately, understand? Don't wait for my signal. 20 minutes later, they were ready. Jack stood by the manual override controls, insulated gloves on his hands. They offered minimal protection at best. On my mark, Jack said into his communicator. Cut main power, then restore at 10%. Acknowledged, Velnock replied from the main engineering bay. Jack took a deep breath. 3, 2, 1, mark. The ship went dark for a moment, then the emergency lights flickered back on. Jack immediately began adjusting the manual regulators, his hands moving with careful precision. Blue energy sparked around his fingers as he redirected the power flow. Power, levels stabilizing at 12%, Maya reported through the communicator, coupling temperature dropping. Jack continued his adjustments, sweat beading on his forehead. Each touch of the regulator sent painful shocks through his body, but he didn't stop. 15% power restored, Maya updated. Engine function. Returning. Jack made one final adjustment, then stepped back, his hands trembling. Lock it in. Velnock confirmed the settings were secured, and Jack stumbled back to the main engineering bay. His hands were red and blistered despite the gloves. That, said Captain Zixlar as Medical Officer Trilva rushed to treat Jack's injuries, was either the bravest or the most foolish thing I have ever witnessed. Jack managed a tired smile. On Earth, those often go together. 3 hours later, the Harmonious Accord docked at Outpost Gamma 9. As Jack prepared to enter cryosleep for the remainder of the journey to the Galactic Council, he found himself surrounded by the alien crew. The Council will hear of your actions, Captain Zixlar promised. You have changed how many of us view humans. Just doing my job, Jack replied modestly. Maya stood nearby, watching with new pride in her human heritage. Will you return to Earth after the Council meeting? Jack shrugged. Probably, though I might look into interstellar repair work. Seems like you folks could use someone who thinks outside the box. As Jack settled into his cryopod, he glanced around at the alien faces watching him with newfound respect. Whatever came next, he knew that the galaxy's perception of humans, of Deathworlders, would never be quite the same again.